Good day, colleagues. As Regina indicated, I am Reggie Raju. I am from the University of Cape Town, South Africa. And I would like to thank the LPC for the opportunity to have this engagement. I have the distinct pleasure of hosting 4 of my colleagues to engage with you on weaving the golden thread in the delivery of a publishing service. Nigeria, representing the West and Central African research. I have 2 librarians with me, Jill Claassen from UCT and Anna Leonard from Namibia. And then we have Professor Ncube, who is an academic and a researcher. This session has its roots in my claim that open access movement has betrayed Africa. Lamenting this betrayal is not going to help. What Africa needs is to explore an Africanized conceptualization of open access. As for us, open access is a significant conduit for the acceleration of research for the growth and development of Africa. I need to emphasize that I use the phrase of the acceleration of research for growth and development. I use that phrase deliberately. For me, research is about finding solutions to the challenges that beset society. Therefore, it is important to develop a philosophy to the African environment and its challenges. The mantra that I abide by is that the open access movement must be driven by social justice imperatives and equity principles for inclusion. The development of the platform for the continent is to share its research output, and this is one of many interventions to address African challenges. The underlying principle for the creation of the platform is the transformation of the publishing landscape to improve access and distribution. And I think that is a significant principle here, and distribution of scholarship for the growth and development of Africa's research agenda. A significant pillar in this research agenda is the nurturing and growing civil society in accessing and manipulating scholarly content for economic and social development. And that again is another critical concept. Here we're looking at development, economic and social development. The guiding ethos of the platform is to address local research imperatives while contributing to bridging the research exchange divide between the global South and the global North. The transformed publishing practices will enhance sharing of African scholarly output for the generation of new knowledge for manipulation by other African researchers and the rest of the world. Another critical driver for the development of the platform is the quest for social justice through opening the channels for the free and broadened distribution of scholarly literature and the free access of scholarly content. What I've done is I've tried to encapsulate this thinking in this graphic. On the immediate left, we have what I'm calling the golden weave. Here, we're talking about the researchers, the librarian, and the IT specialists. And these components combine to deliver a library publishing model. And the outcome that one would like to see is the whole issue of social justice, inclusivity, and demarginalization. And we want to challenge or disrupt the commercial publishing or provide an alternative publishing model to showcase African research. I personally am not aware of any organization besides LibSense that makes a deliberate effort to bring together the three critical role players, or what I'm calling the three critical pillars to advance open access. In terms of the continental platform, to advance library publishing. The LibSense initiative brings together the research and education networks. And here I'm talking about the, the information technology experts, the researchers themselves, and the academic library communities to collaboratively build a sustainable and relevant approach to open access in Africa. The golden weave or the golden pillars, excuse me, are critical in the realization of a library publishing service. In my opinion, there is a disconnect between these pillars as sorry, as each does not share the lens of the other in determining a way forward. LibSense has the vision, or had the vision, to get these golden weaves to work together. What UCT has done was extracted that vision and applied it to the platform with a distinct set of outcomes in mind, and that is to drive social justice, to be more inclusive, and to advance demarginalization. And as shown in the graphic, we then have the challenge. Where does this challenge, which basically is the need for an alternative publishing model or a disruptor, where does this challenge sit in our continuum of engagement? Do we skip the, the outcomes mode and jump to the challenge mode? Or do we have a hybrid purpose? Unfortunately, not all of these issues will be teased out in this session, but these are issues that one needs to keep at the back of one's mind when charting a way forward. This session will be a conversation among the relevant stakeholders, and as I said, what I refer to as the golden weave, who share their experiences with regard to the continental platform. Jill will share UCT Library's rationale for the creation of the platform. What were the drivers behind the platform? Omo will share WACREN's perspectives on the development of commensurate technology. And Caroline will share a significant breakthrough, and this is my view. What Caroline has done with her book, for me, is a significant breakthrough, where she negotiated with a commercial publisher to have her book published also in an open access stream. And then lastly, but not, and as importantly, Anna will share her experience in terms of how University of Namibia had come on board and have adopted the platform. After my colleagues share some of their views, we will then engage in a conversation about the platform and the purposes. We will try and keep the conversation to around about 45, 50 minutes. And then the last 10 minutes, we will have engagement with you, the delegates. That is how the session will be structured. So I will ask Jill to share her thoughts with us. Jill?
Sure. Good afternoon, all. So, oh, I'm not allowed to share. So, Reggie, I think
Sorry,
you
let
need
me
to.
stop sharing. Sorry, Jill.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to share my screen. So there was a bit of a lag when Reggie spoke. So I'm hoping that you can hear me without a lag. If need be, I will just,
You're fine,
yeah,
Jill.
okay, great. Let me just put that in presentation mode. Okay, great. So the University of Cape Town is one of the leading research universities on the continent. And because of that, because it's a better resourced university, really it has a moral and social obligation to share all its scholarship. And within UCT, one of its strategic objectives is social responsiveness. So the moral and social obligation to share scholarship aligns itself to UCT's strategic goals. In 2016, the libraries embarked on a library as publishing program. And at that time, we started off with open access journals, and then we embarked on publishing open access monographs and textbooks. Going through the literature and having published on and around the scarcity of African scholarship, we quickly realized that library as a publisher service would be able to fill the gap or contribute to filling the gap of the scarcity of available African scholarship. And really it was through making African scholarship freely available both to the reader as well to the author, where the social justice underpinnings started. And social justice principles are part of the Library as Publisher program at UCT Libraries. And through what was published, we saw that previously marginalized researchers could now come to the libraries, ask for their research to be published, making local content freely available. And it was with these underpinnings where it was the social justice underpinning and seeing that research was both peer-reviewed as well as being able to publish research that was locally relevant. The concept of the continental platform was formed, and at that time, we started with a one of the national universities, their library in the country, and then we moved outside South Africa. And the way we did it was we still use a tenant model. And that model meant that we could take the IT challenges that Africa may have. We decided we would take it off the table. So we have a centralized IT skills, and it's currently the platform is hosted at UCT, and UCT has the server space as well. But with this tenant model, it meant that compartmentalization of the platform could take place, and individualized African institutions could take ownership of this platform. They could individualize and make the platform their own, in that through their compartment, the look and feel, through the colors and the logo, and the footer and the masthead would have that institution, that African institution's identity. And it meant that when anybody found, for example, the University of Namibia's journals, it would have the URL of the University of Namibia, for example, and Anna would speak about that. So the tenant model allows for African higher education institutions to publish as freely as they want, to publish local relevant research, and it could be local to their region, to ensure that through making the scholarship freely available, of course, participation then can then take place with no cost barriers, and where African researchers would not be swayed by the global North publishing landscape, where they had to publish in a certain journal and publish certain kinds of material, but rather through the continental platform, they have the liberty to then publish what is within their niche area, and it would then mean that that research that would be freely available could improve and contribute to the betterment of their own society. So I'm now going to hand over, I think Reggie mentioned it would be Omo. I'm going to stop sharing Omo.
Thanks, Jill. I don't have any slides to share. I just was going to visit, Reggie's definition, the golden weave, and how we sort of got involved in that. So maybe a bit of introduction, because I'm in a different forum. So I work for WACRAN, as Reggie said. We are a research education network, and we're regional in the sense that we cover the Western Central African region, but we also have sister networks in other parts of Africa. So there is the Continental Alliance in South and East Africa, and ASREN in North Africa. So we interconnect countries in the different regions. And we all participate in the LIBSENSE initiative. So a little bit of history there that is relevant to this. So we had, before LIBSENSE actually started in 2016, we had been involved in some European Horizon 2020 programs that were some projects that were sort of building out some infrastructure. And infrastructure, as it was called at the time. We had put out some open access repositories, identity federations to sort of authenticate to them and authorize users. And at the end of the project, we realized that there's a gap. So we had some researchers in the room, but we discovered that we had information management shortages. And then it sort of, we sort of started getting connected to librarians, and even within that community understood that there was a gap between the IT and the library. And that's what gave birth to LIBSENSE. And since we all got together in the same room, we have sort of discovered how necessary it is. So hands up for Reggie's Golden Weave. In terms of how we support this platform, we have the same, Reggie says he extracted from LIBSENSE. I think it was mutual. I think we got quite a bit from the work UCT was doing, and all the colleagues in LIBSENSE who share the same basic ideals. So for us in the NRENS, it's because we're building infrastructure, we're very much for Africa-led and operated infrastructures, and those principles that underpin those infrastructures are similar to what you and Reggie have just sort of expressed. Now, in terms of supporting the African platform, your platform, the platform we all want to adopt now, it is still in design phase, because from a WACRAN perspective, from an NREN perspective, we have to get more users on to understand what kind of requirements they will have. So in the case of Namibia, there wasn't a consideration. They were very willing to sort of get onto the platform in the way it was. But there are two ways the platform can emerge. It could be cloud-based, in the sense that we would centralize in some neutral location that we're all happy with. Now that will be optimal, but the realities on the continent mean that it might not be the case. And then the other way we could approach this would be to create a sort of a logical centralized scenario. But this will be that, you know, when you have countries who would like to have their content within their boundaries, you can have a distributed system where each country or the countries that require this sort of infrastructure would have them in their countries, but there will be one sort of portal to this continental platform. So I'm really looking forward to engaging a little bit more with this as we go on. But the bits that I'm really keen on, and I'm really happy that Reggie sort of articulated that very strongly, is the need to express our own path as Africans and get African research a whole lot more visible. Thank you. Reggie, this is where you come in. I think it's
yeah, sorry, I was muted. Caroline, you wanted to share your experience, or I want you to share your experience with the LPC.
Thank you, Reggie. So hello, everyone, whatever time of day it is for you. For us, it's about 6:30 p.m. In Cape Town. I'm delighted to see that there are so many of us in the room, so more than 127 like-minded souls. It's very pleasing to be here. So Reggie said to me that I could share a bit about my experience in getting my latest publication, which is a book published by a commercial publisher, also available on EUCT's platform that we're talking about this afternoon. And so I was just trying to gather my thoughts this afternoon to think about what I was going to say and how I managed to negotiate this and put it off with the publisher. And so it is really a rather long tale, and it is there are a number of factors, I think, that got us to this point. So I'm going to try and share some of these points. I wrote them down, so if I do look down, I'm looking at my notes. So I think that there were four main things that got us to this place. The first would be precedent. So I think that one of the main obstacles that a researcher like myself might face in wanting to do this, you know, you have this dream of bringing some scholarship to the world and sharing it, yet you have to operate within a very preset and well-established way of publishing. And so well, at least I felt some trepidation about how I was going to negotiate this and how to do this. And I would not have known where to start had I not had some precedents to leverage off. And so the history then of publication with this particular commercial publisher is that there were at least two precedents in which I had been involved. So I'm part of a large research project, and that research project, the Open Air project, has actually published two books with this commercial publisher, first in 2008 and then again in 2013. But both volumes were edited volumes and they were negotiated, you know, I wasn't involved in the negotiations at all. And so this was a first in the sense that it was now a solo manuscript and that now I had to take on the actual negotiation myself with the publisher. But of course, the precedents made it easier. The fact that I'd been involved in two previous projects and I knew exactly how it had worked in the past. And so I used that precedent to get my foot in the door. I also, of course, had the benefit of the contracts that had been used previously with those two publications. And so we really used those as a template. I went to the publisher and I said, I want to do this. I'm on my own now. There's this template. Can we talk about it? So that helped. Then the third thing that also helped was, I would say, an ongoing relationship with the publisher. So the South African legal publishing space is very small. We have only a few, less than a handful of commercial publishers in the space. And as legal academics working in the space, we know the publisher and its employees well. We meet at conferences. And so there was already a relationship, so to speak, that also made it easier. And finally, I'm the co-editor of a journal that is also published by this particular commercial publisher. So that helped me a great deal. And then, so these all are thoughts from my perspective, you know, the hurdles that I had in my mind and what helped me to cross them. I think it's also important to look at it from the publisher's perspective and what perhaps might have led the publisher to be more open and willing to venture forth in this way with me. I think that timing was key. Timing being, we find ourselves in the middle of a global pandemic that has, if people hadn't previously been sold to the idea of open scholarship and the need for resources to be available without restriction, that was brought home very quickly, very harshly by the pandemic that forced all of us home. And I think that it also showed commercial publishers, this one and all others, that business models as we had all known them were not fit for purpose in the times in which we live. And so I think that timing was pivotal. I think many publishers are starting to think and are in fact rethinking their business models, going forth to make work available online. So that timing, if you like, this shift in business models, this shift in the way that commercial publishers are doing their business, then coalesced with my own personal dream and my own ambitions. And so everything came together, so to speak, quite easily. You know, I would sit up at night and wonder, if I send this email and ask for this, will it be received well? But actually everything went smoothly. I put forward my proposals, and of course they had to go through the bureaucracies within the commercial publisher, but in the end we were able to come up with the publication. And so the publication is a hybrid publication. You can purchase hard copies from the publisher if you so wish, but there are of course the open access versions of it that are hosted at the UCT libraries. And the last time I checked, I think we had achieved about 260 downloads since the 16th of March, which is much more than I personally had expected. So those are some thoughts. Reggie, I don't know if you anticipated that this was where I would go, but this is where I've taken all of us. And of course, if you want to redirect me in any way, I'm happy to go and to engage, but I'll stop here for now.
Okay, I will come a little later as a social justice expert yourself. I will tease out this issue with you a little later.
Great.
Yeah. Anna, would you like to share your experience, Anna? Anna, are you still with us?
Yes, sure, Raju. I would, I think, like to share my experiences, but I do not have the power, the slides to share. So
Fine, that's absolutely fine.
Good, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Anna Leonard. I am a librarian research support services here at the University of Namibia. I would briefly take you through the process and experiences of us UNAM joining the continental platform as in terms of open access publishing of our journals. So initially, the initiatives to open access publishing at UNAM actually have been a focal point of discussions, I think, since 2010. And there have been several attempts in publishing open access journals, starting with the Namibian Development Journals and the International Science and Technology Journal of Namibia. But unfortunately, for some unforeseen reasons, so the systems collapsed, and maybe because of lack of expertise, and the whole content were lost at some point. And in 2018, the UNAM library actually went through an international quality assurance review, through which the aspect of library publishing services was identified as a gap from the library perspective. And Raju was also part of the panel that came to review the UNAM library. And that actually leads to further discussions in terms of the benchmarking, where we had a benchmark visit to UCT in 2019. And one of the key issues that took us there is actually to explore on the publishing services that the UCT library is offering to the research community. So during that visit, actually, I think we then later on kind of coordinated an advocacy type of meeting with the journal editors and the Center for Research and Publications here at UNAM. And the idea of joining the Continental platform was well received from the journal editors, especially that the journals were partly already being made available online through the institutional repository, simply because we did not have the capacity to perhaps to make use of the journal management and publishing systems. So during that 2019, we also had a kind of a training sessions with the editor, and we immediately joined the platform in 2019. And 2020, we had then a consultative training on the publishing practices and the OJS to work on the workflow. So, but initially also the key issue also that kind of pressurizes us to move to the Continental platform was also because of the economic crisis, because the university could not afford to kind of pay for the printing of the journals. And the repository was not the right platform to publish the journals. And I think also understanding the benefits of having the journals online on the right platform to improve the visibility, accessibility, boost readership, and also to respond to the requirements in terms of the indexing of our journals in future, and exploitations of metadata in the indexes kind of also forces us to speed up the process. So in that line, collaborations and joining the platforms actually supported the UNAM library with the especially in the ICT resources and infrastructure, and also the have that beneficial of having a mass content platform instead of having journals pages in silos, which would also then improve the trust in terms of journal content, but also provide a platform to kind of share experiences and advise each other in terms of complying to the publishing best practices, so to say. So and we have actually done some sort of calculations that we have looked at the cost of the journal printing so far. And it appears that the university, now that we have moved to the open access online journals, we have saved around about 50,000 US dollars per annum, which translates to about 600,000 in Namibian dollars. So, but the key issue is actually to contribute or to kind of fill the gap in terms of knowledge productions from Namibia, especially having a one-shop kind of platform where journals from African universities are being hosted. I think those were my experiences. And I think I have to mention that we have 5 journals that have been hosted in the platform. And from that processes, we from the UNAM library have actually wrote a kind of a recommendation and motivation letter to the National Research Commission for the establishment of, for perhaps for the relook into the establishment of journals in Namibia, which have led to the establishment of a committee to look into the national research and journals framework. And myself and one of the colleagues from UNAM are actually serving on that committee. I think that concludes my experiences in terms of the UNAM joining the continental platform. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. One of the issues that Anna raised was the issue of the lack of expertise. I think a significant part of what the NRENs will do is, as Jill indicated, bridge that gap. Rather than all of us reinventing the same wheel, your philosophy has always been, we will provide that backbone for you to do what you do best, which is us as librarians, and then in terms of Caroline as the researcher. Can you comment on this philosophy of you providing, when I say you, I'm talking about the NRENs, the 3 NRENs that you mentioned earlier on, in supporting open access publishing?
I think I can maybe just sort of talk around our own experiences, and why we've sort of resolved that that's the way to go. So in different sort of works that we have been engaged in, I mean, even prior to the projects that we talked about, we have been involved in, or rather the AAU, the Association of African Universities, that have been involved in trying to support open access publishing earlier on, and sort of this I'm talking up to 10 years ago now, and provided infrastructure servers, not necessarily infrastructure servers, and capacity building for librarians to build out these platforms. But I think what we recognized after a few years of this sort of work was that we were spending a lot of time, trying to get librarians to get familiar with the technology and the technical requirements to get these platforms up. And what that was doing, it was eating up their time and stopping them from sort of moving the state of art in their own professions forward. And now it's even worse. Now you have the platforms are getting a whole lot more complicated. You have to support indexing, you have to support persistent identifiers, you have to support scalability. So and then even in some universities, UCT is a very able university. So the IT department is a robust one. It can support the library. Well, in many parts of Africa, that doesn't really exist. So it just makes sense that there's a division of roles in trying to solve this problem, and sort of and let the librarians sort of not abstract themselves from the technical issues and focus on the actual production and management of the content. And there's a lot to be done there, and that is also a moving target in terms of its development. So there are all sorts of forms of publishing. Don't forget, we're not the experts in this aspect, but we are starting to see that there are new forms of publishing. That space is evolving quite rapidly. So it would make sense to not lumber the librarians with the additional burden of thinking about the platform. So, and that's generally how we're seeing it. And and although I knew Anna had used the platform, I really hadn't heard her story. So it just strengthens our resolve. Anna's problems are not untypical, if I would say that, if I would put it that way. There are quite a few libraries and countries that have the same challenges across Africa. So this makes a lot of sense. And I was listening to it and I was thinking, well, maybe what we should do, Reggie, is that, moving on from here is actually start to look at how we pilot this on a broader scale and see how many honors will come out of the woodworks and join us.
Thanks, Omo. Caroline, I think, if you look at what Jill had indicated, what Anna has mentioned, and the fact that Omo is talking about how do we become more inclusive as a social justice expert, setting aside your intellectual property expertise, to take us through a typical researcher thinking in terms of how do we support social justice and sharing, especially in terms of Anna, how do we fill the knowledge gaps in Africa?
Thanks, Reggie. You might have opened a Pandora's box here and will be unable to shut me up because this is something I'm very passionate about. And so this really is kind of an internal driver for myself, just the way that I want to be in the world. And so I would think that when academics think about making their work available, that they're often driven by this sense of who they are and what they want their scholarship to count for. And going back to what Anna was saying, so we have personal ambitions, we have things that drive us, but we exist in a context. We live on the African continent that is seized with certain challenges that we do need to engage with. So for me, just looking at the context where I'm located and also just my own personal aspirations of actually wanting to make my scholarship count for something and work for something. So just thinking on those two tracks, for me, it's obvious. It's like it's a no-brainer. My scholarship must speak to the challenges and it must be open. It must be open because if you actually want to make an impact and contribute to social justice initiatives, you want your thinking to reach the people who are active in the social justice space. And they are mostly very active, but they do lack resources, or their resources have to be driven in a particular way. And I wouldn't want to be the scholar that forces them to try and get through a subscription paywall to get to my thinking so that they can use it. So I would advocate that if you want to make that contribution to that sector of society, to meet social justice ends, then your work has got to be open. It's got to be relevant to the context, and then, it will grow legs on its own. It will almost just take off. All you need to do is write in an accessible way, meeting the challenges and make it open. Then, off it goes. So that for me is how I bring in social justice. So you've said this phrase a number of times, social justice expert. I'm a passionate person about social justice. I think that all of us need to work towards it. And then I also wanted to steal like 2 minutes of this response time to say that I'm talking specifically from a personal perspective and saying this is what drives me, this is my context, this is what I want to do. I also want to take a pause and actually also appreciate and perhaps reiterate that actually the spaces in which we work as scholars actually have got external drivers that also must direct us towards open scholarship that adds to social justice, right? So the publicly funded institutions at which we work, many of them have open access mandates. The national funders who fund our work, such as the National Research Foundation, also has open access mandates, and also private funders. And so I feel that as a scholar, you're in the space where you're driven by your own internal thinking and way of being, and also these external pressures from your institution, from your funders, which to me, it feels like all of us should be going down this track. But, like I said at the beginning, you might want to shut me up because not all of us are going in that way. But I'm hoping to persuade, those who are not currently on this path that do come on board. We need to walk this path to make a difference for our continent and our institutions.
Yeah. I'm going to ask this question to you and to Jill, but you talked about impact and you talked about the NRF having open access policies, but we are still stuck with old methods of evaluation. So that kind of contradiction creates a problem, because if you want to push for open access and you're using old traditional ways
We lost Reggie, but we're on the same wavelength. I'm sure I know what he was going to say, so I'm just going to go with it. And I think the point is that whilst we may be internally and externally driven, to open access to aid, social justice, that actually in our career pathing as scholars and researchers, we are still constrained by these old models of evaluating scholarship. And so you still have these standards about, you have to go publish in these particular international journals. You've got to publish with this particular publisher, and off you go, to those publishers or those platforms. And then often you find that they are closed. And as a scholar or researcher wanting to make your way through the ranks, you are then, there you are. What do? Do you go the old way in order to meet these imperatives so that your career path can advance? Or do you buckle trends and go open? So this is an issue that confronts all of us. My own take on it was try and do both, right? I would typically plan to make sure that I publish open and also have, the traditional kind of meeting, the old way of evaluation, closed publication. So this is what I've had to do as a scholar. It's very difficult because you are torn. You're in the middle of these two systems, and I do wish, Reggie, that we would somehow coalesce the standards for evaluation and career pathing and what we want scholars to do.
So maybe I can just give an experience that Reggie and I had when we had a meeting with two senior academics as well at our institution around writing a textbook. And they knew they needed to do it, especially because of COVID and what COVID presented to them in terms of making scholarship available. But their first thoughts literally was, how is this going to contribute to my ad hominem application? And it is really the tension that you spoke about, Caroline, where you of course want to be ambitious, of course, and move up the academic ladder. But you also want to ensure that your work is relevant and makes an impact. And really just amazing that you did this, where you were able to toggle both lines, where it is a mindset change, and maybe it would be 6 months down the line when these same academics will come back to us and say, our students still can't afford this textbook. We have reconsidered and we have found funding, for example, from the national funder, and we're going to write this textbook. And we're not even going to talk about ad hominem promotion, for example, but just focus on the impact for students and civil society. So I want to say I acknowledge the tension, but maybe if you had to rewind your career, you are an international scholar, you're a seasoned scholar, but if you rewind and you had to do things over maybe from the beginning, would you have started off with this confidence that you could negotiate with a traditional publisher? Yeah, maybe you could comment on that, Caroline.
No, I'm shaking my head, Jill, as you're speaking. I wouldn't have dared. And so, like I said earlier, it was the result of a number of things, the timing, the ongoing relationship, and the precedents that got me to that particular place where I could negotiate. But barring all that, no,